Hello, this is the Aussie Arrowhand. What you are listening to is part of a series where I read from the book What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Rahula and make some personal commentaries. The Buddhist Attitude of Mind, continued. Rahula talks about belief. In his view, belief only happens when there is no seeing. When you see something, belief disappears. Rahula uses the example of a gem hidden in the folded palm of his hand. Belief arises because you do not see it yourself. But if he opens the palm of his hand and you see the gem, there is no longer a belief. Rahula highlights a phrase in an ancient Buddhist text, realizing as one sees a gem or a myrobalan fruit in the palm. The phrase in question is Karatala Amalaka. It literally means the myrobalan fruit in the palm of the hand. The myrobalan fruit, also known as the amla or Indian gooseberry, was chosen because it is translucent. When you look at it, you can see its skin, its internal structure. Nothing is hidden. Rahula's choice of a gem functions in a similar way. There is a concept used across different Indian philosophies, pratyaksa, to describe direct perception or immediate sensory experience. The fruit is intended to represent this. If we directly experience something, we do not need faith or reasoning to know and understand it. My problem with this comes from a familiarity with the philosopher Immanuel Kant. Rahula seems to believe that if you clear the mental fog through meditation, you can remove the filter and see reality as it is. Kant made a distinction between phenomena, the thing that is experienced, and noumena, the thing in itself, which we can never access. I mention this not only because it was regarded as a watershed moment in the history of Western philosophy, critiquing and synthesizing views from the schools of rationalism and empiricism, but in my estimation, Kant really nailed the language for talking about this. My question then is, can we access the thing in itself through Dharma and meditation? Theravada Buddhists such as Rahula seem to think so. In Mahayana traditions, there is a doctrinal disagreement with Theravada in sunyata, emptiness, which claims that things do not have an inherent essence at all. The noumena is inaccessible because it isn't there. Moving on, Rahula recounts a story. A disciple of the Buddha named Musila tells another monk, quote, "Friend Savifa, without devotion, faith or belief, without liking or inclination, without hearsay or tradition, without considering apparent reasons, without delight in the speculations of opinions, I know and see that the cessation of becoming is nirvana." Unquote. The Buddha responds, quote, "O bhikkhus, I say that the destruction of defilement and impurities is meant for a person who knows and who sees, and not for a person who does not know and does not see." Unquote. Of this, Rahula concludes, quote, "It is always a question of knowing and seeing, and not that of believing. The teaching of the Buddha is qualified as ehipassika, inviting you to come and see, but not to come and believe." Unquote. This story is actually two quotes stitched together. The first paragraph about the two monks having a discussion is from the Kasambi Sutra, and the second paragraph about the Buddha is from the Sabbasava Sutra. The way this is written is misleading. Rahula writes in such a way it seems like the monks and the Buddha are having a conversation when they are not. He does reference the passages, but it uses a notation system that I personally find unclear. In quoting the Kasambi Sutra, Rahula is also misrepresenting it slightly. He quotes only one of 3 characters engaged in a dialogue about knowledge, Musila, a monk who experiences direct realization. The third, Narada, challenges Musila's viewpoint. He has also experienced direct realization, but it has not brought him any closer to nirvana. He uses the analogy of a well, where he knows there is water at the bottom of the well, but he does not have a bucket and rope to reach it. There is a difference between seeing the water and reaching it, as well as drinking the water and being transformed by it. He remains in a state of existential thirst. Perhaps Narada is wrong and Musila is right, but in both cases there is seeing. The quote from the Buddha states that the one who does not know and does not see cannot destroy defilement and impurities and attain nirvana. I read this as saying that wrong view, michidifi, and enlightenment are incompatible. Not that seeing or right view, samadhi, alone, are sufficient to attain nirvana. I think Rahula is justified to contrast these 2 quotes, but he could have expanded the passage somewhat. Rahula highlights a few quotes used in Buddhist texts about persons who have realized truth. The dustless and stainless eye of truth, Dhammakaku, has arisen. He has seen truth, has attained truth, has known truth, has penetrated into truth, has crossed over doubt, is without wavering. Thus, with right wisdom, he sees it as it is. So to see is a wisdom free of dust and stains. It is to remove doubt. It is to cease wavering. Rahula quotes the Buddha speaking about the moment he attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. Quote, "The I was born, knowledge was born, wisdom was born, science was born, light was born." Unquote. He then states, quote, "It is always seeing through knowledge or wisdom and not believing through faith." Unquote. I don't think the quotes Rahula has selected support his point. They describe arriving at a state of total certainty. They do not say anything about belief or faith, and there is not enough context to know whether or not these played a role in leading those quoted towards enlightenment. Personally, I believe faith to be necessary. When we are in a state of ignorance and do not know something, to search for an answer is an act of faith that something must be there. When others speak of enlightenment, in choosing to search for it, we must have faith that we can reach it too. Rahula quotes the Buddha after the Buddha attained enlightenment. But to reach enlightenment, the Buddha spent 6 years in the Ganges, living the life of an ascetic, in search of a way out of human suffering, in doubt that such a way exists. This was an act of faith to me. Rahula positions Ehipasika, come and see, as appreciated during a time when Brahmanism was a dominant cultural force during the life of the Buddha. He describes Brahmanic orthodoxy as intolerant, insisting on believing only in their tradition and their authority as the only truth without question. Buddhism grew out of the Shramanas, groups of wandering ascetics living in the Ganges who were united by their opposition to the authority of Brahmanism and the Vedas. Rahula tells a story of a group of Brahmins who went to see the Buddha. A brilliant young Brahmin named Kapafika asks the Buddha a question. Quote, "Venerable Gautama, there are the ancient holy scriptures of the Brahmins handed down along the line by unbroken oral tradition of texts. With regard to them, Brahmins come to the absolute conclusion, this alone is truth, and everything else is false. Now, What does the Venerable Gautama say about this? Unquote. The Buddha responds by asking if any of the priests, their ancestors, or even the original authors of those texts personally saw the truth they wrote about. When the youth admits they didn't, the Buddha compares the religious tradition to a line of blind men. Because the first person can't see, those following him are simply holding on to a leader who is just as blind as they are. The Buddha states, quote, "It is not proper for a wise man who maintains truth to come to the conclusion, this alone is truth and everything else is false." Unquote. He states that if man has faith or believes something, then it is proper to say, "I believe this." But if a man has faith or believes something, it is improper to say, "This alone is truth and everything else is false." The Buddha explains further, quote, "To be attached to one thing, to a certain view, and to look down upon other things, views, as inferior, this the wise men call a fetter." Unquote. This is another example of Rahula's quote stitching. The Brahman story comes from the Kanki Sutra, while the Buddha quote about looking down on views as a fetter comes from the Sutta Nipata. He uses a third quote from the Mahatana Sankhya Sutta, where the Buddha cautions about a teaching. Quote, "O bhikkhus, even this view, which is so pure and so clear, if you cling to it, if you fondle it, if you treasure it, if you are attached to it, then you do not understand that the teaching is similar to a raft, which is for crossing over and not for getting hold of." Unquote. He comes back to the story of the raft. The Buddha describes his teachings as like a raft. Once it is used to cross a treacherous ocean, it should be discarded once reaching the other side. Quote, "This raft was a great help to me. With its aid, I have crossed safely over to this side, exerting myself with my hands and feet. It would be good if I beached this raft on the shore, or moored it and left it afloat, and then went on my way wherever it may be. In the same manner, O bhikkhus, I have taught a doctrine similar to a raft. It is for crossing over, and not for carrying. You, O bhikkhus, who understand that the teaching is similar to a raft, should give up even good things, dharma. How much more then should you give up evil things, adharma?" Rahula interprets this as meaning the Buddha's teaching is meant to carry man to safety, peace, happiness, tranquility, in other words, the attainment of nirvana. It is meant for no other end. The Buddha taught only things which would bring peace and happiness to man. Personally, I think there is much more to the raft parable than just that which is worth commenting on. To me, it suggests something incredible, that beliefs are merely a raft towards the destination of truth. Truth, then, isn't a set of beliefs that we collect. It is the state we reach once we no longer need them. The burning question for me, then, is did the Buddha regard the Dharma just as a highly efficient raft? The answer seems to be yes. We must give up even good things, including the Buddha's teachings, once we reach the shore. The Buddhist teaching method of upaya kaushalya, skillful means, can be understood better in this context. If we regard beliefs as rafts floating in an ocean, increasingly distant from truth's shore, a teacher must work with levels of understanding to guide someone towards enlightenment. To the Buddha, the Dharma is an efficient raft, but it is provisional and to be dismantled when it is no longer needed. What does a life where we have reached the shores of enlightenment look like once we have dismantled the raft of the Dharma? I do not know. I expect that conventional truth, samuttisaka, gives way to ultimate truth, paramattasaka, that we understand sunyata, emptiness, and that we habitually follow the middle way. Rahula highlights another quote. not to talk about skillful means, but which I think further illustrates what it is to work with levels of understanding. Quote, "Even so, bhikkhus, of what I have known, I have told you only a little. What I have not told you is very much more. And why have I not told you those things? Because that is not useful, not leading to nirvana. That is why I have not told you those things." Unquote. I will note there is a tension between the Buddha's transparency, as discussed earlier in the chapter, and moments where he employs skillful means, choosing to withhold information in the closed fist of the teacher. My view is that the Buddha withholds information not to suppress truth, but to prevent the disciple from getting lost in a labyrinth of language and concepts. Rahula ends the chapter with a discussion of the parable of the poisoned arrow. In it, the monk Malankya is dissatisfied with the Buddha's teachings and approaches the Buddha with a list of questions he demands the Buddha answers. These questions include things like, is the universe eternal? Is the soul the same as the body? And does the Tathagata exist after death? The Buddha responds by telling Malankya that the Buddha never promised to answer these questions for him, and that such questions are a waste of time. He uses the analogy of a man wounded by a poison arrow who is brought to a surgeon. The man refuses to be treated until he knows who shot him, what caste he is, what his name and family is, whether he is tall or short, whether he has a fair or dark complexion, what city he is from, the kind of bowstring which was used, etc., etc. Similarly, in wasting time with metaphysical questions and demanding answers, Malankya is refusing treatment from the Buddha, often considered the great physician or doctor of the world. Through the Dharma, the Buddha offers practical advice. The Buddha tells Malankya these questions do not address birth, old age, decay, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, distress, and the cessation of suffering. He states, quote, "Therefore, Malankya, bear in mind what I have explained as explained, and what I have not explained as unexplained. What are the things that I have not explained? Whether the universe is eternal or not, etc. I have not explained. Why, Malankya, have I not explained them? Because it is not useful. It is not fundamentally connected with the spiritual holy life, is not conducive to aversion, detachment, cessation, tranquility, deep penetration, full realization, nirvana. That is why I have not told you about them. Then what, Malankya, have I explained? I have explained dukkha, the arising of dukkha, the cessation of dukkha, and the way leading to the cessation of dukkha. Why, Malankya, have I explained them? Because it is useful, is fundamentally connected with the spiritual holy life, is conducive to aversion, detachment, cessation, tranquility, deep penetration, full realization, nirvana. Therefore, I have explained them." Unquote. The Buddha takes a pragmatic view of these questions, assessing them by their usefulness. To return to the raft metaphor, according to the Buddha, the questions we concern ourselves with are a matter of life and death. Our survival hinges on them. He considers anything else, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin type questions, and futile speculation. One thing I disagree with here is that brushing off any questions not directly related to the cessation of suffering as the Buddha understands it may prevent us from reaching new dimensions of wisdom and understanding on this topic. This not only pertains to scientific questions such as how does biology influence our emotions and mental health, but also diving into classic metaphysical debates such as does free will exist, can greatly impact our views on ethics and morality, shifting responsibility from the individual to the causal chain of his environment. Of the questions given, is there a soul has similar moral implications, but even a seemingly useless question such as is the universe eternal stimulates a curiosity for wisdom and connects us with a higher picture that may make all the difference for someone's spiritual and emotional well-being. Having laid the groundwork by discussing the Buddhist attitude of mind, Rahula ends the chapter by saying, "Let us now examine the Four Noble Truths."